Hey guys, what's up? It is Finger Guns, and I am here to talk about the World of Warcraft PTR. Give some feedback and some thoughts, and start discussing what's going on. The PTR, for those of you who do not know, is available to everyone. You just need to opt into the public test realm on your Battle.net account, on your Blizzard account. Then you should be able to download it. I don't even think it's required to have an active subscription, so just about anyone can log in and go ahead and start testing and experimenting with Shadowlands 9.0, the pre-patch release. It's not the beta. You don't get access to any of the new expansion content. It's only the pre-patch content. But most of the changes have been rolled out on the pre-patch for testing. We're going to be taking a quick look at the heirloom changes. Heirlooms have been a staple since about Wrath of the Lich King. I believe that's when they were first introduced. They are designed to help with leveling your alts. You get your main character up, you spend gold on your main character to buy these equipment pieces that you can then use on all of your other characters to help you out with leveling. They, in the past, on live as of right now, they just provide a flat experience bonus. I think with a full set of heirlooms, you get about a 65 to 70% more experience per kill, per quest turn-in, per any source of experience. Well, that flat experience bonus is going away. They're replacing it with a set bonus on the heirlooms. So there is a total of 7 heirloom pieces that you can have on your character. Headpiece, shoulders, chest piece, leg piece, back, and then a necklace and a ring. The rings most characters don't have because they're only available from 2 sources. That is the Stranglethorn Fishing Tournament, which I think you need to come in like first, second, or third place in order to get the ring. It might only be first. I could be wrong there. And then your Shipyard and your Garrison, which just requires a lot of time investment and grinding. And so a lot of characters don't have any of the heirloom rings. Blizzard addressed that by making it so the full set of bonuses that you get from heirlooms is available at 6 pieces instead of requiring all 7, which is super nice for characters like, or players like me who don't have the heirloom ring. But you can also mix and match. So if you have the heirloom ring, but if, for example, you're missing the chest piece, don't worry about it. You can throw the ring on. That way you get the full set bonus. So here's the set bonus as it currently is on the PTR. The 2 set is rested experience consumed is reduced by 30%. The 3 set is increases your out of combat regeneration in the outdoors, normal dungeons, and battlegrounds. The 4 set, which is really the bread and butter in my opinion, this is the biggest one, gaining a level triggers a burst of knowledge, dealing holy damage to nearby enemies and granting you 40% of your primary stat for 2 minutes. Defeating enemies extends this effect by about 5 seconds per kill, up to an additional 2 minutes for a maximum total of 4 minutes. And the 6th set is just the same as the first 2 set bonus. Rested experience consumed is reduced by 30%. So is this a good alternative to the experience bonuses? It depends. The effectiveness of the heirlooms is more about, at this point, having gear that scales with you. So the way that heirlooms work, if you're not super familiar, it's a piece of equipment that you can equip on your character at level 1, and from that point on, up to a certain point, for instance, the Tattered Dreadmist leggings here that I'm using as an example, I've upgraded once, meaning that they scale up to level 39 on the PTR. So for levels 1 to 39, every time you gain a level, this piece of equipment will scale up to that point. Having scaling gear is always going to be valuable no matter what, but is the heirlooms as they function now an adequate replacement for the experience gains that we're losing. Let's talk for a second about why Blizzard is making this decision to remove the experience from heirlooms. I think it's a good one. The average leveling time on the PTR and in like the Shadowlands beta is actually faster than what it is on live with the 100% XP bonus from basically the COVID-19 response from Blizzard. So, and it's shaving off a good like 5 to 10 hours depending on how optimal you are and how efficient you are. Leveling speeds are going from about 20 hours down to somewhere between 10 to 15 depending on how good you are. So Blizzard doesn't really feel that the bonus experience is really that necessary because of how quick leveling is going to be starting in Shadowlands anyway. And I largely agree with them. I think that's a fair point. You don't need to cut like a 10-hour, 15-hour experience down by another 50%. At some point, if you're leveling too quickly, it just like loses all of its meaning, and you might as well just be making a character at max level, which is a debate for another day. I don't think that this is necessarily a fair trade-off, though. I have some issues, and a lot of it looks decent on paper. I will say that. It looks decent on paper. Effectively, with rested bonuses, for example, getting 60% more rested experience for essentially every percent of rested experience that you have is quite nice if you're banking rested experience on a character. This is the first thing that I want to talk about just because it's on the set bonus twice, and it's kind of their stopgap for losing the flat percentage as far as experience gains go. And it's not really that effective considering, well, it's more effective depending on how you play. So if you're the type of character who's willing to make a character, bring them to a rested zone, keep them there for a day or two to maximize how much rested experience you have, and then utilize that to tap into it. Or if you're a player who levels alts at a much slower rate, or you don't have opportunity for longer play sessions, so you have more downtime in between leveling sessions and you can utilize this particular set bonus, that's fine, I guess. But on a larger scale, for the vast majority of the player base and people leveling alts, I don't think this really works as a fair alternative. I think if they altered it so there was one effect where you get reduced XP consumption, and then another effect that allowed you to accrue rested XP faster, I think those in tandem would work very, very well. Like the 6 set bonus, I think would be a lot better if you gained rested experience at an increased rate. That might require a lot more coding and a lot more back-end changes to implement properly. But I think that that's the first major change that would really, really benefit heirloom scaling. Just the ability to gain and accrue rested experience faster rather than consuming it slower. The second set bonus is kind of just a quality of life thing. This was kind of an interesting issue in Legion with the Bear Tartar, which was a food item that you could make if you were a cook, or you could buy off the auction house from people who would make it, and it gave you an out-of-combat bonus that regenerated your health significantly quicker than normal, which was really, really nice for just chain leveling. You know, you would eat it, get your well-fed buff for an hour, and between mob pulls, you would just regenerate your resources and your health at an insane rate. It just made the leveling experience that much smoother. It was really, really nice. Little quality of life thing that we didn't really have access to in BFA. And now it's just something that you can do all the time. The fact that it works in normal dungeons and Battlegrounds, I think, will certainly be interesting to see us. But I don't do a lot of PvP to level my characters, but it will be interesting to see how that affects Battlegrounds. And in normal dungeons, you know, I don't think it's going to be that much of an impact, because in normal dungeons, you don't really have a lot of downtime between pulls anyway, as things stand right now. That'll affect healers more so than any other class, I think, just because it means that they'll be getting mana back more quickly between mob pulls, which, you know, really only matters at super high levels anyway. The 4 set is the other big one. So I think this is the crux of it. This is really the effect that they wanted to give players to replace the flat XP bonus. On paper, it sounds really good, but effectively in gameplay, it really doesn't work that well. There are a few changes that I think need to be made to this in order to make it effective, and really encourage people to use it and make it feel like it's a huge bonus instead of just a little niche effect that happens that you can utilize sometimes. Because right now on the PTR, that's really what it feels like. And I've done a good amount of playing around with this in dungeons and in the open world on different classes, different specs, just trying to see if any classes or specs can utilize it better or worse than others. And there definitely is quite a disparity just based off of classes that can more effectively chain pull and AoE pull and sustain themselves a little bit better versus classes that might have a more difficult time fighting multiple, you know, just mobs of enemies. And I'm talking about pulling like a good 7 to 10 mobs versus, you know, 2 to 4 at a time, like I feel a lot of classes can handle. But this feels really disjointed. If this is supposed to be like more of a semi-permanent effect, like a pseudo-permanent effect that Blizzard wants you to be working with while you're leveling, while you're out in the world, it doesn't really work that way. So the time extension per kill is too short to compensate for a lot of the traveling downtime that you're going to be doing in most questing scenarios, going from one mob grind to the next. In that time, you are most likely going to be losing that buff. And when you're turning in quests, if you're turning in a lot of quests at once, especially like me, I quest, especially at lower levels, I quest very heavily through the Ghostlands because it's just very well designed, going to Tranquillin, picking up your quests, making a loop around the Ghostlands, turning them in, picking up the new quests, making a second loop around the Ghostlands. Ghostlands is just very well designed in that regard. But even in Ghostlands, where you can be very optimal and pull a lot of stuff and be very efficient in how you mob grind, I find that the buff still wears off after like probably somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes, which really isn't long enough to carry you to the next level. You could probably on average get, I'd say, about a third, maybe if you're really efficient, a half a level with this buff, which to me diminishes the value of having it in the first place. If you're going to have something like this that's really powerful, that you can extend and really work hard to maintain, it shouldn't be as tight as it is to really plan and play around this specific effect. I think this should be, the 40% buff shouldn't be like just a passive. There should be some gameplay involved with maintaining it, but the 2-minute time frame and the amount of time that the buff is extended by per kill is just not enough for the buff to feel really meaningful after a few minutes of gameplay. I think the easiest fix to this is twofold. Just make the buff last a flat 4 to 5 minutes. And every time you kill a mob, rather than just extending it by a few seconds, have the buff refresh. This allows you to basically 100% maintain the buff in most general gameplay situations. And, you know, barring something coming up and you need to step away for the computer for the duration of the buff, barring just real life mishaps or real life events going on. It will be a lot easier to maintain the buff when every kill resets it to full at about 4 to 5 minutes. And it will require a lot less optimization and a lot less intense gameplay for maintaining the buff. And I think this is really the crux of what should be replacing the experience buff. Like, if you're going to be replacing something as powerful as flat experience gains, the effect that's replacing it needs to be significantly powerful, and 40% of your primary stat is really, really powerful. And I think that by itself would be adequate, though I do like having that little bit of gameplay tied to effectively maintaining the buff. So having that balance is, I think, really, really just good game design. It's not something that you get for free just for having the heirlooms on. It's something that you really need to prepare and play around a little bit for. But to the extent that it is currently, it's just way too much. The buff falls off too quickly. And if you gain the buff as you're turning in quests, it's very likely that by the time you get back out into the world to utilize the buff will be gone. So 2 minutes just isn't a long enough time. The downtime between traveling and the downtime between questing basically causes this weird... It encourages this awkward gameplay of constantly having to be pulling and fighting mobs, which a lot of people don't like. It kind of backpedals on the leveling design more into the realm of classic, where you're just out in the world grinding mobs more so than being worried about quest turn-ins for your sweet juicy experience to level up. I don't think it's very conducive to how the questing system and how the game is played by most players in today's day and age. If you're like me, who really wants to optimize and be as effective as possible, you're going to constantly be pulling stuff to maintain that buff as much as possible, as long as possible, and you can extend it up to a fair while. Like I said, I could get, depending on the downtime and how far I'm traveling, I could get a good half of a level, a good 7 to 15 minutes depending out of this buff. Especially at lower levels where time to kill is a lot lower and mobs aren't nearly as threatening, and you could pull an entire army with no issue, especially depending on what class and specialization you're playing. But this needs to be, I think, fixed in a pretty drastic way, just to allow for the buff to be maintained. So my suggestion would be make it a flat 5 minutes with the buff resetting on every kill. That way, if you come back to do quest turn-ins and ding off of your first quest turn-in, you don't have to rush to turn in the rest of the quests and end up losing the buff by the time you're back out in the world killing mobs. And this should interact with quest turn-ins in a way. I think that quest turn-ins just flat out resetting it as well would be fine, because it would allow you to maintain the buff for much longer and not have to worry about rushing through your quest turn-ins when you go back to town, because there's a lot of little maintenance things that you need to do every time you go back to town. You need to make sure you're selling stuff, emptying out your bags, stuff like that just every 30 seconds here and there, it eats away into that 4 minute theoretical total. It needs to be reworked and extended and designed in a way that is really a benefit and more of just a niche advantage that sometimes you can utilize. That's how I personally feel about it, especially if this is going to be the big buff that they want replacing the experience gains. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the 6th set, the rested experience consumed being reduced by 30%, rather than just duplicating that, bake 60% into the 2 set bonus and then allow for rested experience to accrue more quickly. I think that would help more players. It'd be more beneficial to a larger demographic and more, allow for varied play styles and play time to maximize how heirlooms work now. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I will be putting out more PTR content covering classes and feedback and just general things like that. And I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.